You have never found a dead bird. Ask yourself why. 300 billion birds are alive on Earth right now. Every single one of them will die. And yet most people, across an entire lifetime of walking parks and gardens and forests, will stumble upon a dead bird only once or twice, if ever. The math does not add up. Somewhere between 3 and 5 billion birds die in North America alone every single year. That figure comes from research published in Science in 2019 by Cornell Lab of Ornithology scientists. 5 billion deaths, and almost none of them leave a body you will ever find. So what is actually happening? If this channel has earned a place in your week, consider subscribing now. What follows is not a simple answer. It is 3-layered truths stacked on top of each other, each one stranger than the last. And the deepest one will change the way you look at every park, every garden, every tree you have ever passed beneath. This channel exists to find the things nature hides in plain sight. Not mythology, not speculation, real research, conducted by real ornithologists and behavioral ecologists, translated into the language of someone standing outside on an ordinary morning, wondering why the world feels slightly incomplete. That is what this is. The first and most logical answer is also the most physically immediate. When a bird senses it is dying, it does not remain in the open. Instinct, millions of years of it, drive to dense brush, under root systems, into the hollow cavities of trees. This is not a conscious decision in the way a human might choose a room to be alone in. It is older than that. The biological mechanism beneath this behavior is linked to what researchers call the predator release hypothesis. A weakened bird in the open is a meal. So it's the same survival circuitry that kept every ancestor of that bird alive long enough to breed now steers the dying animal toward concealment. The body hides itself before it stops. Imagine a sparrow on a cold November morning in Central Park, not on the path, not on the bench, but pressed into the base of a holly bush no one has looked at in years. The second answer is where the script rewrites itself. You might expect the explanation to stay with the bird. It does not. The true agent of disappearance is something almost no one considers, the ecosystem itself, specifically the invertebrates. Within hours of death, often less carrion beetles, ants, blowflies and mites begin a process so efficient it borders on invisible. A 2011 study published in Forensic Science International found that small songbird carcasses placed in forested environments could be reduced to near-complete skeletal remains within 72 hours under warm conditions. 72 hours, that is 3 days. The body does not linger. It is consumed in a window so narrow that even a dedicated observer, checking the same patch of ground every morning, would likely miss it entirely. At 3 in the morning, while you were asleep, a blackbird that fell from a roost in your garden may have already been reduced to nothing detectable from standing height. The counterintuitive agent here is not a predator. It is not a fox or a hawk or a cat. It is a beetle the size of a watermelon seed, working in darkness, doing what it has done for 250 million years. The American burying beetle, Microphorus americanus, can locate a carcass by scent from distances of up to 2 miles. It arrives before dawn. It is already finished before noon. The third layer is the one that operates at the largest scale and leaves the least evidence. Raptors, corvids and mammalian predators do not merely eat birds. They carry them. A peregrine falcon does not consume its kill where it falls. It returns to a plucking post, often the same ledge or branch used for years, sometimes hundreds of meters away. What remains there? A cluster of feathers, a fragment of sternum, is so small and so site-specific that a human would need to know exactly where to look to find it. At a broader scale, consider this sequence. A house sparrow is struck by a Cooper's hawk mid-flight over a suburban street. The hawk carries the sparrow to a rooftop. It eats. Within 6 hours, what little remains has been taken by crows. By the following morning, the rain has scattered the feathers across 3 gardens. Each individual piece is below the threshold of recognition. Not one witness ever forms a coherent picture of what happened. What this reveals, when all 3 explanations are held together, is that the conditions necessary for a human to find a dead bird are exceptionally rare. The bird would need to die in the open, not in cover. It would need to be missed by every invertebrate, every corvid, every passing mammal for long enough that a human happened to walk past. The window is not hours, it is sometimes minutes, and you were right to notice the absence. The world really does seem to hide its dead. But the stranger question is not where the bodies go. It is whether birds themselves understand something about the process. Here is where the ground shifts. For decades, the dominant scientific assumption was that birds were largely indifferent to death in their own species. They fled from predators. They mourned nothing. Then behavioral ecologists started looking more carefully, and what they found complicated that picture in ways that have not yet been fully resolved. Research from the University of California, Davis, published in 2015 in the journal Animal Behavior, documented what the team called cacophonous aggregations, gatherings of western scrub jays around dead members of their own species. The behavior was not feeding, it was not predator surveillance. The birds were vocalizing loudly, sometimes for extended periods, and avoiding the body entirely. The researchers were careful. They did not call it grief, but they did call it something science had not previously named: a social response to conspecific death. The evidence from the 2015 Davis study is specific and modest. Jays gathered. Jays did not approach. That is what the data shows. In follow-up conditions, the researchers found that the presence of a dead jay reduced foraging in the area for a period after the event. Something about the encounter changed the bird's behavior. The study does not prove the birds understood death in a conceptual sense. It does not prove grief. What it proves is that the death of a conspecific produced a measurable behavioral response that cannot be explained by simple predator avoidance. That is a smaller claim. It is also a more durable one. Similar patterns have been documented in other corvid species. Crows in Seattle, studied by John Marslough's lab at the University of Washington, demonstrate what researchers describe as funeral behavior, though Marslough himself is careful to use the word only in quotation marks. Crows avoid sites where a dead crow has been placed. They recruit other crows via alarm calls. They remember the location. These are measurable, replicable behaviors. The interpretation of what they mean is where science currently holds an open door. The honest position is this: we do not know whether birds experience anything like awareness of their own mortality. The neurological architecture is different enough from mammalian cognition that direct comparison is genuinely difficult. What researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology have noted is that birds demonstrate a form of behavioral flexibility around death events that goes beyond simple fear conditioning. But the precise internal state that generates that flexibility remains at this point unresolved. So here is what we actually know, assembled in full. Birds die in concealment because instinct drives them there. The bodies disappear within hours because the decomposition community of any healthy ecosystem is extraordinarily efficient. Predators carry remains to remote sites, and rain and wind scatter what little is left. The result is a world where 3 billion deaths per year leave almost no recoverable trace for the average human observer. You have walked past dozens of birds in the last phases of their lives without knowing it. The hedge at the end of your road almost certainly knows more of this than you do. And then there is the other register, the quieter one. The fact that birds seem to respond to death, not just flee from it, suggests that absence is not simply the end of a thing in the animal world. Something about a death leaves a mark on the animals nearby. The space where a bird was is not simply empty. The jays call, the crows return. The behavior of the living is changed by what happened to the dead. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, the closest we have to an answer to the question you began with. Why does the world seem to hide its dead? Because something in the living is still paying attention to where they went. You have never found a dead bird, and now you know why, and perhaps, in the quieter sense, what that absence has actually been holding. Have you ever seen a dead bird? Leave your answer in the comments. Where were you? A park, a garden, a road, a forest? How long ago was it? Was there any sign of what happened, or was it simply there, unexplained? I read every single response, and I will be here in the comments this week.